Are you overwhelmed by the challenge of personalizing communication for thousands of students? That's where Element 451's AI assistants come in. From nudging prospective students to guiding those already on their journey, AI assistants don't just automate, they write, build, and optimize every step of your digital campaigns. Discover how at element451.com/AI team.
Hi, I'm a higher ed CMO, and I have a confession to make. I feel like it's time for higher ed to start thinking about hiring folks to serve in a chief revenue officer role. I think a CRO could really help unify efforts across admissions, marketing, online programs, fundraising, you name it, and really help create a cohesive strategy that aligns with institutional goals. And I also think that the person in this role could really help with busting some of the silos that exist between all of these areas. So when my friend Steven Rutt posted on LinkedIn about a month ago that he was promoted to Chief Revenue Officer at Abilene Christian University, I was so excited to talk with him and get him on the show. I hope you enjoyed this absolutely amazing conversation that I had with Steven about his role and how we think more institutions should be thinking about it. Welcome to Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO, a podcast that empowers higher ed marketers to bring innovation, creativity, and excellence to their work. I'm your host, Jaime Hunt. Join me every 2 weeks for discussions with some of the best minds in higher education marketing. Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO is part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher educational professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. I'm so thrilled to have Steven Rutt here. Steven and I met through the Academy for Innovative Higher Education Leadership, which is with ASU and Georgetown. It's connected with Jeff Salingo. I think we were the 10th cohort and we were in the same learning circle. So I got to know Steven there. But Steven is just an awesome person. I'm so excited. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I was so excited to see your recent promotion. So Steven was recently promoted to Chief Revenue Officer, and that is a role you don't see that much in higher education. Can you talk about how that came to be?
Actually, I did try to Google before I took the role and tried to find other people that had that same title and honestly couldn't find anybody. So if you know anybody else, I would love to be able to, start to create a little group of CROs that may exist. But really what kind of set forth the stage for it was, I think our president is definitely very forward thinking, always looking to take some calculated risks. He's been president for 14 years, which is not always heard of in higher ed right now.
Yeah.
And so he's got a good tenure. And Abilene Christian University is starting to become more of a national university. It's been a small West Texas university for a long time, but we've grown and have really gotten into a financial foundation over the last 10 years, the introduction of online programs. And so he's really looking for how we continue to sustain that and build into what a national university could look like. And so the other aspect I would add to that is, as we both went through the academy, I was doing a lot of self-reflection, and ultimately what popped up, it was just a unique case of, I was hearing him explain a problem he was trying to solve. And I was like, you know what? I was feeling confident in myself after going through the program. And I was like, I have a unique skill set that I think can help solve that problem. And so basically laid that out to him, and we worked through over a couple months of what that may look like. And ultimately that's what led to this role.
That's amazing. The academy experience was so good. And I feel like I'm so glad for you. It like built your confidence and made you be like, yeah, I can solve this problem. Because that was kind of what it did for me too, was this
Mhm.
feeling of like, no, I'm a problem solver. I'm equipped with the skills to be able to tackle anything. And
Yeah.
it's so cool to hear that same perspective from you.
They should definitely, we're definitely promoting it, I guess, a little bit here. They should
Yes,
sponsor it or this podcast or something like that.
I
So,
agree. I agree because it's not cheap. So,
yes.
do you feel comfortable talking about what the challenge was that you initially were tackling?
Yeah. So, like many universities, I think the traditional residential kind of experience, the enrollment, uh, we have seen what I would say not necessarily significant declines, but just not being able to hit the targets that we have set out for, or at least the top down ones. And so, for the last few years, ever since post COVID, I've heard that challenge talked about a lot, and just, hey, how do we get back to where we were 10 years ago? And so that's a lot of where his focus has been over the last, I would say year and a half or so. And so, even though my background is mostly on the online side, there's a lot of the same challenges that do cross over, even though it's a very different enrollment cycle, and there's definitely uniquenesses to it.
So what does the chief revenue officer oversee? Like what areas report up through you?
So that's the unique aspect of this, and we actually spent a lot of time talking with our president about this. Of uh, truly, what the way we did it, and I think this is where, as we potentially, I hope to see it expand throughout higher ed a little bit more. But the reporting aspect of it, I more focus around the analytical side of it. So data and
Mm.
analytics, we have started to centralize that specifically, and are using that to be the cornerstone of what the role is. Marketing enrollment technically don't report up through me,
Oh, wow.
although the budget does.
Interesting.
And the way I talked with our president about this was, hey, you know, I currently also have the title of chief operating officer for our online campus. And so marketing does report up through me in that, but enrollment doesn't. But the way we manage that piece of it is, as I also do manage the budget for the entire online campus. And so I believe we're able to see the synergies, the efficiencies that we need to do and drive the right collaboration, just mainly focused there at the budget and kind of target level.
That is really, really interesting. So
Yeah.
so really in marketing is driving the enrollment budget. Am I hearing that right?
No, not necessarily
Okay.
that. So I own, in my chief operating officer role, I own all of the budget for the entire campus.
I see. Okay.
And so ultimately, but enrollment does come up under that, marketing does as well. And so that's how it works.
Okay. That's really interesting. So you were previously the chief operating officer and for the online programs, and now you're the chief revenue officer. Do you still have the chief operating officer duties as well? Like,
I
or is
do.
just temporarily? Is that like you're permanently doing two jobs?
Well, we did kind of take a few responsibilities off my plate with the COO role on the online side. Kept some of the ones that correlated really well with the chief revenue officer we call it the system level, as we're thinking about essentially a system with multiple campuses.
So how do you balance the needs of the residential revenue and the residential students and those needs with the online campus? Because I've talked to some other folks who have both, and the investments being made very heavily in the online, and some of the folks I talked to, it's kind of like they've left the residential out to dry, basically.
Yeah.
Like, let's just let it fail. How are you balancing those two areas?
Yeah, it's not an easy task. I do think that's where the analytics, the data and analytics side comes in. Our ability to set targets well is really important. We ultimately do have separate teams operating and doing the marketing enrollment across those. So there is some level of, hey, there's still that aspect of it, but from a resourcing standpoint, my role really is to try to think of that across the entire university. And hey, are we deploying the resources well? And if not, how do we kind of solve for that? And that could be across, hey, how we think about campaigns, how we think about technology, how we think about, just the people that we hire. And so it is a tough balancing act, but ultimately we're trying to grow both. And so there is that pointed target of that we're going after, and we do expect both of them to grow.
I love that you said that the targets were set based on data. Because if I've had one person say to me that they've had an enrollment target that's set based on just a random number pulled from the sky, I've had 100 people tell me that. So tell me more about how you're using data to set those targets.
Yeah, and this is honestly probably one of the I think we've crafted it well and done it well with our online campus, and what I think a lot of the work will have to be over the coming months with our residential side is because it has been historically very top down driven. Hey, there's like hey, we need to hit a certain revenue number, and so this is what that calculates out to from a freshman enrollment number, and so hey, your marketing enrollment team, go hit it. And so a lot of what the process we're working through right now is very similar to what we implemented on our online campus, which is, hey, we're going to first take a market driven approach. So what is the external data that we're looking at? Obviously iPads is very lagging, but it is also very helpful to at least see some long arm trends. And you can start to at least have conversations around the assumptions of, okay, where do we really see this going in the next 5-10 years? And starting there, so that you're at least aligned around, hey, where is the market going with some of these long arm trends? And then we can start to look at and break that down geographically. Obviously, we talk a lot about all the different shifts within the market. And so where do we think we're actually going to see that? And now we're going to take it, as granular as we can get. And we'll start to kind of connect that into how we manage our day-to-day business. And so whether that's looking at by program, by area of study, and starting to kind of really say, hey, not just, hey, we need to spend this amount of money to generate this amount of leads or inquiries to how many enrollments, but also talking about, hey, at the end of the day, we believe the growth is in business, or we believe it's in health professions. And so we need to, not just from a marketing enrollment team, be aligned around how we build that target. And honestly, being very intentional about building that bottoms up kind of view, but also bringing in our academic partners, which historically have not been a part of that process. And so that's a lot of what I'm working on right now, and hopefully building here in the early stages of this role.
That is super exciting. And I am about to get on a Jaime Hunt soapbox here for a second, but I feel like the longevity of your president and the fact that he has been there for all this time, I think that probably allows him to be working on some of these more foundational issues that affect a lot of institutions. That it's like a lot of institutions are not relying on data. They're like kind of putting out the fire that's in front of them, and they're not necessarily thinking strategically about the whole big picture. And I think sometimes that happens when you have new leadership that's like, these are the quick wins I need to get to like impress everybody about, my leadership or my new presidency. And then they move on. And then it's another person that comes in and does these sort of quick wins that are basically band-aids. But it sounds like Abilene is like, no, we want to address foundational issues and really set like a strong foundation for what the future of the institution is going to be.
Yeah, 100%. And actually had a conversation with our president this week. And one of the things I was trying to articulate to him was, hey, one of the things you'll start to see, especially if you're not thinking of those foundational issues, a lot of your conversations are very reactive. You're focused on hey, I've got to put this fire out. I've got this thing to take care of. I've got to, do whatever, hit this demand that's I've got to do. What you'll start to see is a shift in your conversations being a lot more proactive and thinking more strategically, and having the space and the bandwidth to really actually even talk about that, because you're leveraging the data in a way that you're, instead of finding out, oh, I've got an issue, right now, but you were actually able to see that 2, 3, 4 months ahead, or even just, if we could understand an issue, a couple weeks ahead and make a decision, that time, you're starting to see the benefits of that proactive conversation.
I love that. And I'm thinking about when I was at WSSU and it was the start of the pandemic. And I remember Elwood and I were having a conversation, and I was like, we should be looking at how we're going to come out of this. Like, I know there's a lot of work to be done right now to get through it, but we need to be thinking about how to come out of this. And he was so excited about that he formed this Project Phoenix. Like, how are we going to rise from the ashes from this? And, I got put in charge of that on top of managing the COVID comms. It was a whole thing. But like the whole idea of looking down the road and seeing, okay, this road's not paved. We need to get a crew ready to be able to pave this road, or this road is going to veer to the left. We need to be prepared to make that pivot or that turn. I just love that idea. And I think that's something that probably I felt like we got from the academy. Look, here we go. You can send a check to Jaime Hunt, P.O. Box, whatever, Jeff. But like, I feel like that's something I got out of the academy, is like really looking at those longer range issues.
That was exactly a lot of what I needed in just the reflection, and be able to kind of start to have the time to think about what's going to be coming up 6 months, 12 months, even further out. And that's a lot of what, with my current work that I'm doing is, hey, I'm currently thinking about what's it going to look like in 2030?
Yeah.
Because I need to start there and then work my way back with the team. And ultimately that's where it actually helps, where, our marketing leader, our enrollment leaders are doing what they have to do today. And I'm hopefully helping kind of empower them with that just additional layer of view of, hey, I can come in and create that space for you guys to be able to kind of, okay, you're in the day-to-day, but at some point we've got to come up and start to think a little bit more long-term. And how do I create those spaces or that environment for them, so that we can be thinking about that?
Tell me a little bit more about that, because that's super interesting to me. This, like, I know, having been on a campus, and I know from talking to colleagues and friends, that we're focused on bringing in the next year's class with every bit of energy that we have. How are you creating that space for them to be thinking longer term?
For me, it first starts with our ability to understand, and it's where it goes back to data. And so as I think about what I'll just call our performance framework, there's different layers of data that we're going to look at. Most of the time we're focused very on a day-to-day basis on that kind of more foundational layer. I'll call it like a go-to-market layer, or specific marketing enrollment metrics. And that's where we spend a lot of our time. And so what I'm trying to do is create, okay, we have then kind of the outcomes measures above that we have even above that are financial measures, where I'm focused heavily on. And then even above that, you have like board metrics. So thinking governance type of data. What I'm trying to do is create the understanding or the linking of each of those layers. And so to me, one of the critical components of that is our ability to forecast. And so you might right now at a time frame, and actually this is a conversation just even last week as well, as like, hey, it's still way too early to understand how fall is going to land. I get that. But I want to be able to understand what is our range of possibility. And if I can get the teams to understand that, we can now start to have conversations around what truly are the true big drivers that can lead to us hitting kind of a top end of a range or a bottom end of a range, or just hitting kind of straight in the middle. And so what that ends up doing is then creating the conversations around risks and opportunities. What truly are our internal risks and opportunities? What are external? What are things we can't necessarily control, but may impact what our freshman class is going to be? And so that right now is the foundational layer that we're building. What that ends up doing, and this is what I've seen, is create just this space where, and we do this a lot in finance, where, hey, we're going to build a budget, and then when we change, on a month to month, something changes. We do like a waterfall approach, and as we look at a variance, and we say, hey, this was in our initial assumption. This is how those assumptions are changing, and this is how that's impacting how we think about what we initially put together. And ultimately, ideally, you're good enough to, within like one standard deviation, be able to kind of forecast what that range is going to be. And then it really elevates what those key things that you really want to have conversations about, mitigating certain risks, or, hey, we've really got to go after this opportunity because that's where we think will help us get to the top end of that range.
I know you've only been promoted for about a month now, but have you implemented any strategies yet that you have seen that are making a difference in terms of revenue growth?
Yeah, a couple ways to. one way to think about it too is, well, I'll think of it more just even from a resourcing perspective. So early on in the stages of crafting this role, our residential undergraduate team was putting together a pretty robust marketing and enrollment plan for what that's going to look like over the next 3 years. And so president heavily involved in that. And then when we got to the resourcing side of it, basically it looked like, hey, we need to spend $50,000 for every additional student,
Whoa.
which is like, that's like a non-starter from anybody from finance. You're not going to get that type of resourcing if that's what the return is. And so what changed the narrative and what I was able to help kind of do is come in and say, hey, let's make sure we're looking at this the right way. And so how should we be benchmarking our marketing and enrollment spend against whether it's other universities or other industries? How should we be looking at this? And so whether that's a cost per enrollment or just looking at a percent of revenue, one of the ways I typically look at it for our online is we're looking at lifetime revenue, and then what is our cost of acquisition as a percent of that. And so combining marketing enrollment cost, and then really what are we comfortable with? And so when we shifted that paradigm, it went from, hey, we're spending currently 8% of our lifetime revenue to 11%. Well, that's a little more digestible. Yes, it is going up, but hey, we believe that's given the competitive nature of the market today. We believe we need to increase that benchmark. And so that to me was just a slight shift in the way we look at the data, but was enabled to allow us to enable kind of, hey, this is why we need to invest there.
That is brilliant. I mean, so I'm teaching a course right now in marketing and higher education, and one of our modules is around budget and making a case. And I love the idea of taking it from a dollar amount, because the sticker shop can truly be, even if it's if it's not $50,000, even if it's like a much more reasonable figure, it still can give people like a little bit of heart palpitations to think about how much they're spending. But when you think about breaking it down more as a percentage and then being able to benchmark that percentage against what is standard or what is, with the headwinds that you're facing, what is needed, that is a really brilliant way to kind of come up with what is a reasonable budget for those efforts.
And one example, because this is what we've been doing for a few years now within our online campus. One of the things I had to convince our president of is, hey, you're expecting us to grow and grow pretty significantly. Name me an industry out there where you're not investing pretty heavily in acquisition to grow. When you started to lay out the numbers, they were expecting us to grow and also drive margins, which, hey, I can't name an industry where that's like a standard that you do when you're trying to grow 20+% in a highly competitive market.
Right. I love it. I just love the data application. I love just the notion of looking at this through a lens that isn't throwing spaghetti at the wall. Like, I feel like that's so much of what our budgeting process looks like, is just like, yeah, $500,000 more, and I could do this or this. Not this like very intentional data-driven approach. I'm really curious though, like for your new position, what kind of KPIs are you going to be using to evaluate the success of your role?
As we look at KPIs for the CRO role, obviously revenue is within that title. And so ultimately, if revenue is not growing, that's really the benchmark for success. Now, I do think I need to break that down a little bit deeper and understand that at a little bit more granular level, whether that's net tuition revenue, whether that's, hey, sustainable net tuition revenue. So it's not just, hey, we're going to grow revenue, but in unsustainable programs that are just going to drain us. And then also thinking it from a perspective of market share. So I think that overarching KPI, that's the biggest one for me. The second piece, just because now my role spans across both campuses, our online and our residential campus, it is going to be around efficiency of our acquisition spend, whether that's cost per enrollment or whether that is our, what I'll just call cost of acquisition, combining the marketing enrollment costs together and seeing if we can stay within certain benchmarks that we have been talking about. Ultimately from there though, those are to me the two large KPIs that are going to drive what success looks like. But ultimately, to me, what we talked about earlier, of that linking those KPIs to what the kind of more operational metrics are, is really where I'm trying to get to. And so I honestly haven't found the greatest way to explain that or articulate that, or, hey, this is what that exactly looks like. But that's what I'm hoping to solve over the coming years.
So I know you said that marketing and enrollment don't report to you, but you must work really closely with them. How are you leading through influence versus like, you're my direct report, I'm telling you what to do?
The first part is knowing that I have budgetary management over those dollars. That does help. But besides that, there are a few key meetings that we have where that really is going to be driven. And so, as a system, we have our leadership team that we report out on a monthly basis. Hey, this is how we're trending for our marketing and enrollment metrics. This is how we're looking for fall, or this is how we're looking for the next term for online. And so I have responsibility over that process now. So that comes in with, again, the ownership of all of the data and analytics. There's a lot of support that I'm giving those teams. The one unique aspect of it is I still do have ownership over our online marketing department as well. Although I have an AVP that essentially runs the day-to-day of that. It is heavily controlled through that budgetary piece, but instituting kind of that support side of, from a data and analytics perspective, this is how we should be looking at it. How do we start to build those things? That's where I see most of the connection happening. And I will say all the leaders across have been leaning in heavily into, hey, we need that support. And mainly because, hey, we feel like we need the additional resources to hit the goals we're being asked to hit.
So are you involved at all in the development of programs? Like if you're out there seeing that there's a need for this type of program, are you working with faculty on developing programs around that? Or how do you think that's going to look?
Heavily involved in a particular way. Again, more from the financial and the data and analytics side. And this is, to me, where it's essential. And I can give a little bit of example of what we've already been implementing. I think I've heard you talk a little bit about busting silos.
Once or twice.
We feel the same way of, hey, any decision made should not be done in a silo, because one decision made in academics definitely impacts the way we think about things we're doing in marketing, enrollment, across all other departments, and vice versa. And so how do we create the environments where we are working together? We have those feedback loops where we're getting that picture of, hey, this is what the holistic student experience is. What we've been able to do with our online campus is start to say, hey, we're going to be very intentional about that. We're going to create the environment. We're going to bring the data in. We're going to bring the financial transparency into this, elevate program directors over a certain program. We're going to give them views into all of this, and we're going to give them that feedback so that whenever we do develop a new program or enhance a program, it's got all of the information that we need, and they can interact with that. On the flip side of that, we're also supporting that from specific centralized resources. And so what we call that our model, our operating model, is basically collaborative governance and integrated operations. Where we've seen that be very beneficial is, hey, it's helped us accelerate. We need to change the name of a program. Actually push that through the process actually pretty quickly. We've also taken some residential programs and said, hey, we want to adopt this model into taking a residential program into this process. And in one case where we had about 6 months to launch, we took a graduate program, increased their first year cohort size by double, and their net tuition revenue by 40% in that first 6 months. And so that's how we think about just breaking down those silos, because we know that's what's truly going to help elevate us and really drive revenue growth.
That's how schools need to work,
yeah.
Right? Like that, and that's not like from 20 years of experience. That's rarely how they work. There's usually not the level of intentionality that's needed, I feel like. I want to pivot just a little bit. You presented last week, the week before, at the AMA conference. Can you tell us a little bit about your presentation, what you talked about?
Yeah, we've talked a lot about data, resourcing, target setting, and that's really what the presentation was all about. So I co-presented with our marketing agency that we leverage for for our online campus. We have a very unique relationship. I feel like they are truly an extension of our team, also very data driven. And so we tried to lay out exactly, hey, this is how we compete in the online space, leveraging data. And so really taking that performance framework, how we build goals, how we bring them into the process of that, how they support us in that process, and then ultimately what that has helped us drive over the last 3 years. And so really thankful for their partnership. And again, I do feel like it's a truly an extension of our team, and always unique to see how we're able to kind of push constantly on, hey, we want to be innovative, we want to be thinking differently, not just, hey, I need skills and resources in this area, but I really want you truly to help us think about the strategy we're trying to implement.
I love that. And I think it's such a hot topic right now. So many schools are trying to spin up online programs to make up for the revenue losses. But also, I mean, I'd love to hear your perspective on the changing desires of students, particularly post-pandemic, in terms of online education.
We're definitely starting to see that shift happen where the typical, hey, I want to go to a residential campus, that is starting to shift a little bit. We see a lot more of that younger age really starting to adopt and understand that, hey, I can get a quality education through online. And so we are seeing those needs change. I think the overarching value of higher education, obviously, that conversation comes up quite a bit. And so finding those unique aspects to deliver an online experience that also builds community is really, truly where we're focused in at. Because I think you can create community, not just in a residential campus, but being very intentional with an online. And that's truly what I think no matter what age you are, what students want is they want that community of like-minded people, especially if you're going for a specific career in that field.
Absolutely. I mean, building a network of people and building a network of connections, I think is one of the greatest parts of the college experience. I did my master's degree online 2009 to 2011. And I remember like a lot of people being like, isn't it just like correspondence courses? Like, no, there's people I'm still in touch with because we had side conversations based on discussion posts. And they did a lot of work to really intentionally build that community. Being able to be more in a dialogue with people worked really, really well for me. And I'm sure that there are tons of students that is the case for, and there's no like degradation of quality and rigor with online programs. What advice would you have for someone who's listening to this and thinking, we need this role on our campus, and I want to make the case that it is me who fills that role?
Yeah. First piece would just be kind of a certain assessment, a readiness assessment of, hey, are we able to kind of really take this on? Again, I do think there's multiple ways to deploy it based on the context of your institution. There's probably areas of opportunity where, marketing enrollment do report up through. But I would say, the first thing is obviously that it is top-down driven. It is something the president has bought into, and it is truly trying to solve a problem that you have. The other pieces that I would say in that readiness assessment is really, to me, kind of assessing culture as well. One of the kind of key things for me as I was coming into this was I was a little worried, honestly, and at kind of how it would be perceived, especially across academics, to be truthful. And I remember being in one of the first meetings as our president is talking to our leadership team and kind of laying out his vision for it. And I made a comment of, hey, I know this is not a normal position in higher ed, and tried to lay out, hey, this is kind of where I'm focused. This is what I hope to do. And I remember the first comment was the provost of our residential campus. She said, we're ready for this.
That's awesome.
That right there was like, okay, doesn't mean there's not going to be hard things that we're going to have to work through, but the fact that there's a readiness, there's a desire, there's a culture that, hey, we are wanting to lean into something like this, that was really beneficial. The last thing I would say is, don't do it for the wrong reasons. Don't do it to try to be more efficient from an organizational structure standpoint. Like a CRO is not going to run the day-to-day of a marketing enrollment team or something like that. Those are to me, very two unique skill sets. I've ran performance marketing teams. there's no way I would want to be in sales. That's not me. Those are the things I would suggest as you think about, hey, are we primed for something like this? And ultimately, I think the CRO roles can be truly innovative roles within higher education. So it may be more than just, hey, we need to grow a residential and online campus, but how are we thinking about new product lines? How are we thinking about things that are a little bit outside the box, they're not typical of what higher education typically does? And those are the things we are talking about on a daily basis of what should we be thinking about, especially as we think about the market over the next 10, 20 years and where we think we should be playing and where we can develop unique products.
I would love to revisit this conversation with you in like 3 to 5 years and see, what has been implemented, what has been changed, what is solved, what are the new challenges, how is this working? Because I think there's a lot of institutions that should probably be thinking about this and be thinking about, probably all of them, to be honest with you. And I think my friend Bill Campbell at Chatham University is in like kind of a similar sort of role, I believe, with like looking at budget and funding and long-term vision and all of that. And I think it's exciting to see some of these schools like take a more intentional approach to tackling some of these big challenges. Steven, if somebody wants to like chat with you, get a sense of, what are you doing? I want to know more. Where can they find you?
LinkedIn is probably the best one there. Just make sure it's the Abilene Christian University. My father actually is a professor at Arizona Christian University, and so we do have the same name. So that's probably the best way to find me.
Listeners, as always, you can find me on LinkedIn at Jaime Hunt, Jaime. You can also find me on my website, Solve Higher Ed. And I'm a little bit on TikTok at The Higher Ed CMO. Always feel free to reach out. In the meantime, let's go bust some silos.
Let's do it.
Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help higher ed marketers and admissions professionals find their next big idea and feature a selection of the industry best as your hosts. Learn from Mallory Wilsey, Seth Odell, Jenny Lee Fowler, Eddie Francis, and so many other of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.